I'm Brynn. This is an out of a comfort zone talk for me because it's more back end things. But I'm a front end developer. Uh, it doesn't matter. Um, so we recently had a project where they had some interesting requirements around processing data and having it in Drupal. All their data were in CSV files, and they weren't really willing to change that. And they had a bunch of inconsistent data, so the headers inside the CSV file could change from month to month, which is don't do that. It makes developers' lives really bad. So we needed a way to account for the business areas just changing their mind on titles of things. The data was really messy previously, and the agency had been called out on that. And they had some other requirements around making some custom models of data that they previously couldn't quite do. And then there's another problem on here, but we'll get to that later, and everyone will question why we did a thing, and you'll know. So we're just going to get a bit of a lay of the land. We had a few options on how to solve this problem. So we could put everything on the front end and load the CSV file and process it in JavaScript. And that's an option, but if you've got a huge file, it ain't good. Drupal could handle the data. We could use feeds or something like that. That's an option. That's okay. Or we could do the best of both worlds and let Drupal handle the data part and let a front-end framework handle the front-end bits, so it's not clunky. So we decided to go with the best of both worlds. So we would have a data set, and each data set would be an entity, and that would get processed into Solr, and then you would use Drupal views to spit out a bunch of stuff. This is reasonably complex, but there's a few modules that kind of help out. So we leverage the data pipelines module. That'll take a data set, either a JSON file or a CSV file, and put it somewhere as a JSON blob. We use the micro content module to create sort of on the fly entities, so that the client could specify different types of data types. And paragraphs were used more for site builders and creating one-off pieces of information like graphs or tables if they needed them. And then we wrote some custom modules to sort of tape those three things together. So we wrote a custom processor for the search API that would take the JSON blob the data pipelines spat out, and then allowed the client to specify the JSON keys, and then that would spit them into Solr as single entries, so you could use them in views as single fields. We created a views display module that allowed you to spit out a Drupal view as a Vue.js component. And instead of using static files inside of data pipelines, we created a new source for media items, so the client didn't have to constantly go and update their pipelines. They could just update the media item and press process. So I'm going to zoom through these things, and then there'll be a demo at the end. Hopefully it won't burn. So data pipelines, I kind of explained it already, but essentially it allows you to like specify a file and then do some stuff with it. And in this case, like validate data, make sure keys exist, or even concatenate things together or transform the object as well. So like that ticked a lot of boxes for the client. They're very control-y. That's why we have this like intermediate area of like nodes or custom entities and not just like going straight into Solr. They want to be able to like look at what got created before it ends up in the mystical land of a database. Yeah. But essentially like we would use it to like validate, to make sure that either we knew that things had changed in their CSV files, or to make sure like specific data existed that was like being leveraged in graphs and things like that. Yeah, search API, why Solr? That's a good question. This one really boiled down to the client wanted it, but we'll go with it handles JSON very well. And like it already handles large data sets reasonably well. And then on the front end, we would use like Vue.js and a bunch of JavaScript libraries to create better interactions. So charts and tables. I think we ended up using high charts. They even got to the point where they were using, this sounds cooked, but I'm going to say it anyway. They were using CSV files to like generate whole pages of data. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to just have a quick look at how this kind of works. All right. So this will be a bit of a look into the data pipeline side, and then if we have time, I'll go into the like Vue.js side, but I've got a simple example for it for now. The first thing that everyone should know when they're installing data pipelines is this destinations thing is your best friend. This got me for a little while because I didn't read the documentation. But essentially you can like, it comes with JSON and null, I think, out of the box. I don't know where null goes. Nowhere, I guess. I'll just we'll create one. And we wrote this like bundle, and this just goes and checks for micro content types. So this is going to end up in person. Simple data set is just another custom entity that we had. And instead of like processing like each line as a separate entity, it would just like make a blob and just stick it somewhere. So yeah, now we have a destination. We can go to the content tab and we can go to datasets, and these are the cheat code ones in case I break it. We can add a dataset. So I haven't included our media one here because it's janky, but these are the default ones that come out of data pipelines, and they're probably good for like 90% of use cases. We'll just go with CSV file, give it a name. Give it something, I know, test 2. I'm scared I've already made a test, that's all. Actually, I should. All right, ignore my code for a second. Custom pipelines. So you define your pipelines like, people can see that, right? All right, sick. You can, so we have like 2 pipelines here. We have the no check. This one's my favorite one because it doesn't tell me I'm wrong. But basically you can, this is a better example. You can specify like what kind of transforms will be in there. And so you can take a couple of fields and concatenate them together, I'll show that later with this exact same one. We can even like check to see, is a certain field a certain length? So we were using that to check to see if like certain columns had actual numbers in them that were not machine gobbledygook. And using, because like humans would make these CSV files sometimes. So there would be like NA or just a blank space. And it gave us like a good way to like go back to business areas and say like, you need to fix this if you want it on the site. Or you can transform things. So like you can turn like Y's and N's into trues and falses. So that's what these two pipelines do here. I'm just going to select this one for now. And then you can choose from the destination that we set up before, like where it goes. And then in this case, you would just like specify a file. And this is like something that I stole off someone's GitHub. So, yep. Save and process, sends off a batch job, and it says that we did it right. And hopefully if we did it right, we'll go here and we'll see some JSON, and that works, and that's all well and good. But now it's just a node, and I've got JSON, which is not much better than being in a CSV file, honestly, at this point. So then we would go to search and media, and yeah, here's where we set up the custom dynamic JSON processor, and in these fields you get a new field to add. Could it be a better name? Likely. But you can come here and just like specify a key from the Excel document. So I will go with something that I haven't added yet, phone number. Chuck that bad boy in, hit done. Now it's here, sweet. And now if I go and process this, shouldn't take too long, there's not many entries. We'll clear everything. Index, woohoo. Now I should be able to go to like a view or the Solar database. Hold on. I don't remember what the URL is off the top of my head. That one. My collection, query. In here, we hope there is a phone number somewhere. Except it'll be right at the bottom because these are the ones I processed before. We can check in views. Hold on. Views. People dataset. This is a block I made earlier. But I should be able to search for... No. I didn't save it? Nah, this is funnier. Watching me burn. That's okay. Oh, I hate this gin layout sometimes. It doesn't detect where my mouse is. Yeah. Thank you. It's still there, I just haven't saved it. Now I'll re-index. Now we'll go back to my view. Ah, dang. Alright. Now, hopefully, after some audience help. Yay! That sounded like The Simpsons to me. I don't know why. So, yeah, we have now a view that's been driven by a CSV file with not much problems, I would say, except for just like user error. And that's like pretty good, but we had like a bunch of requirements around making like custom graphs, comparing data. And so we can output blocks with random things and whole pages. But Alex made this plugin that allows us to like specify view component, so view UE component, and then render this, like the output of this, as a view component. Which, I mean, it's not that hard, I guess, at this point, but like the work was good, and it like enabled us to like move quickly and enable the client on the other side, because they had Vue.js experience but not much Drupal experience. So if I go to my homepage, this little block here is running Vue.js. If there's a bunch of errors in the console log, don't blame me. But you can see like this is coming from, maybe you can't see, but this is coming from like a custom component that is defined down in my theme somewhere, here. So this is like using this component here. So we could change this to have phone number. Obviously we would want to do a bit better than this. I think that'll work. No. Wait, did I save it again? No. Ah, bruh. I need experience builder. That still didn't work. Okay. Potentially. I think. Caching. So yeah, I don't have any more complex examples, but we were building graphs and building whole pages, like I said. I don't really recommend that kind of thing. We were using layout builder at one point. You would like build the views as blocks, and then you would use layout builder to like build a type of page for a custom entity, and then you would put those view blocks on that page. It was a kind of mess, but this really helped us solve some interesting requirements. But yeah, does anyone have any questions along the way yet? Oh, yeah, that's a hairy question. So the client isn't allowed a local environment, like a Drupal environment. So we jerry-rigged the single file component loader onto the window object in another project, and they have in their dev environment in platform, when they create their views for testing, they also create an API endpoint. And then they use the API endpoint to develop the view component that they need locally, and then they can upload the file into the Git repo. Don't do that. Just make sure that your client has the tools that they need. So. Yeah, initially my first thought was we would use a migration, but the migration really requires the data to be rigid, or at least predictable. And they had some interesting things at the start. They basically said to us that they can't guarantee that the keys would always be the same. Because they had a SharePoint site before, and they had like Vue.js running there, and every time they would go and update certain data sets, they would have to like rewrite their Vue files because the keys would change. And that's why we are in this interesting schmozzle. Yeah, so I think by default it adds new ones, but our media, like if you chose media, you could just pick a media item basically from the media library. It would go and check to see if like that entity already existed, and it would like update. Yeah, we definitely ran into that problem early on. Yeah, it like pretty much took inspiration from how migrations work. Like everything basically had like an internal ID, and you would just check to see if that internal ID like existed, and if it did, just instead of making a new one, just go and replace it. Yeah. Yes, Joseph, I think. Okay, so I think the first question is how are CSV files managed? I'll answer that. And the second question was, is there revisions? Yeah, cool. All right, so CSV files are managed just through the media library. I believe this may or may not be true now, but at the time we recommended like a way to purge out the old ones. They were really strict on having revisions and being able to roll back at all times. And that's part of the reason why everything is an entity, because we could just roll back to the previous set of projects or whatever it may be, and then just re-index the Solr database, and you would have the old data. So revisions were there, and so was like managing that CSV file. They had like requirements that like for every data set that was on the site, they needed to be able to like reference the source data. So someone needed to be able to download an Excel version, a PDF, and a CSV version of the data as well. Does that answer your question? Cool. Yep. Which one, sorry? We haven't published it. I mean, we could. I mean, I'd be happy to. I don't know if it's any good. But like, yeah, if there's appetite for it. I mean, the data pipelines module is one of those like small but powerful modules. So I know that they already have a bunch of connectors out of the box. OpenSearch, I think, is one. But we originally wrote another like destination that would just go straight into Solr, so we should probably also publish that. Turns out you should just like publish the work that you do. Any other questions, or can I? Is there? Okay, please shout out. I can't see anything. All right. It was hard to hear, but I'm going to try and repeat your question, and you can just like shout you're a moron if I didn't get it right. So I think your question was like, if you have a lot of different data sets, do you need a different pipeline for them? No, you don't specifically need a different pipeline. You may want different destinations. Like we had some complex ones where there'd be like projects and contracts, and they were like discrete pieces of information, but they were connected. And then we would just use views and relationships to like connect them together. So I don't think you need to have different like pipelines. Like the pipeline on its own is just a way of defining how Drupal should handle getting the data out of the CSV file and into the JSON blob. The destination is maybe, do you want different destinations? I mean, that's a dealer's choice, but my suggestion would be probably. What was that, sorry?
So I suppose if you can do all of your data manipulations using the same pipelines.yaml, if you need to do different, you might need different pipeline.
Yeah, sorry. Didn't understand the question. But yeah, if your data is similar, then yeah, I would say just create like one mega pipeline. But if you have like different needs, like we have ones for projects, contracts, they're all different, but yeah, like once you set it up, it's pretty easy. I just go reprocess it. It's kind of like a set and forget, typically, situation. Yeah.
All right.
Thank God.